This weekend, NASCAR returns to the Martinsville Speedway. And, as the title of this video may tell you, I personally think that Martinsville is the best track that NASCAR races on. Now, this is all preference and opinion, so I want to say that from the get-go because I know people are immediately going to go and give their opinions on it. And that's fine. There are plenty of different reasons why people might like other tracks better. I have friends who like Bristol more, others who like Homestead more, others who like Vegas, Pocono, Chicagoland, Michigan, you name it. Everybody has a favorite track that's different than everybody else. But for me, it's Martinsville. And today I want to tell you 8 reasons why I think Martinsville Speedway is the best track in NASCAR. Number 1 is just the racing. Martinsville almost always, in every series, has great racing. Because of the longer straightaways with more of a high-speed acceleration built into them and the hairpin corners at each end that make you have to slow down to nearly a crawl through them, it makes for a one-groove racetrack. And while at faster tracks like Michigan this isn't a good thing, at a short track this is, because it promotes something that we all love: beatin' and banging. And another thing that beatin' and banging also has included with it: the bump and run. The bump and run is just a classic in NASCAR, and it's used at pretty much every short track. But at Martinsville, I like to think that it has a little bit more importance over the same amount of time that these other tracks have had changes to them. You look at Bristol, for instance, yeah, it helped in the early 2000s, but when the best line was at the top of the track, the bump and run doesn't work. At Martinsville, the bottom of the track has almost always been the way to go, and the bump and run has been effective. It's also been a way to really just make it a good product, both at the track and on TV. We as fans love contact in NASCAR. It's something that just starts a conversation. And not only that, but it can start more than a conversation. It could cause a wreck. It could cause a fight. It could cause a new rivalry. Martinsville is really good at doing all of those. And I personally like this at this track more than any other. Now, the thing about Martinsville is that it's a unique track. Number 1, for NASCAR, it's a short track. And for the Cup Series at least, that's kind of rare. There are only 6 short track races as of this season. And while we're getting another short track with Auto Club, it's still not like we have a ton of tracks. There are more mile-and-a-half tracks than short tracks. And the thing is, it isn't like any of the other tracks in any of the NASCAR series at short tracks. I mean, look, for instance, at Bristol. Bristol has wider corners with a hell of a lot more banking. Martinsville just is a different style of racing. Sure, they're both a half mile, but Bristol is much more high speed. Martinsville just isn't. You gotta slow down in those corners more. It is definitely more important to get on the brakes throughout a Martinsville race than a Bristol race, especially if you know how to carry the speed through the corner at Bristol. Not to say that's a bad thing or anything against Bristol, but for me, I love having a driver having to manage both his tires and also his equipment. Now, you also look at Richmond, for instance. Richmond is a bit of a flatter track, but at the same time, it's a much more high-speed track, being that it's a quarter mile longer than Martinsville. So you just have a different kind of racing. Sometimes the high side works, sometimes the middle, a lot of times the bottom. Then you got the Auto Club short track that's coming. Sure, it looks similar to Martinsville in the paperclip look, but at the same time, they've said that this is going to have a lot more banking, more like Bristol, I guess. And then you look at proposed ones like the Nashville Fairgrounds. That has about the same amount of banking as Chicagoland Speedway. Martinsville just doesn't. You look at North Wilkesboro. North Wilkesboro is a little larger, carries more speed through the corners than Martinsville does, though had very similar racing. Martinsville is just a unique track. You know when you're going to Martinsville, you're getting a very specific kind of racing. Now, the next point is that it really evens out the playing field. How many times can you look back at Martinsville's history and just see oddballs in the top 5 and top 10 and sometimes winning? For instance, I talked about a little bit before Dale Earnhardt Jr. in 2006. Dude was missing half the front of his car. Came up and finished 4th. But not only that, and not only in those early 2000s races, look at the Gen 6 era. You got others like AJ Allmendinger in generally lower funded equipment, running up with the leaders. I mean, look at Jeff Gordon's last win in 2015. Who was it that he was racing up front for a long time? AJ Allmendinger. Sure, it might be pit strategy or something, but they were on the lead lap. They were competitive enough to stay up there. That's something that Martinsville and short tracks in general are really good at, but I think Martinsville lends itself due to the fact that it puts such an emphasis on the driver that the driver can make a difference. It's not as aero sensitive as a track like Bristol or Richmond because it's not as high speed. Now sure, there's always going to be some aero sensitivity, but it's very, very rare in my opinion to leave a Martinsville race and say, man, I wish I could have passed him, but my car was just too tight because of the dirty air. It's happened before, and it has rightfully pissed off fans, but it's very, very rare, like I said. Now, my next point is something that you would have to have gone to the Martinsville Speedway to more understand. The Martinsville Speedway just has more of a local feel to it. You feel like you're part of a community in there. For me, the small track gave it a small town feel. When I walked into Martinsville the first time, I really had the same feeling I had when I went inside Wrigley Field. You know it's a professional sporting venue, but at the same time, you feel like it's somewhere you grew up going. Now, yeah, there are people who grew up going there, but what I mean is you grew up going there to compete, to be part of it. That's what it feels like. This track is on the biggest stock car racing series in the world, and it feels like I'm in a high school football stadium. That's really what I think it felt like. Just the community, the camaraderie amongst fans. It was just a fun feeling. It felt like you were going with about 50,000 of your closest friends. Outside the track is the same way. You look at the parking lots and a lot of them are just grass hills and you got to go out one exit. While inefficient, it still again gives me more of that high school football stadium feel. And I like that. Now, another thing in 2015 I learned when I went to the races at Martinsville in the fall was that there is not a bad seat in the house. And this is something that is really true with all short tracks. It doesn't matter if you're in the first row or if you're all the way at the top of the grandstands. You can see everything going on at Martinsville and you can feel like you are right on top of the cars. It's really something that not many tracks can replicate due to their giant scale. For instance, I've been at races at Talladega and Daytona, and while it was amazing and I would go again in a heartbeat, I can tell you that it's hard to see the other end of the track. That's not the case at a short track like Martinsville. While I haven't been in the garage area, I can probably guess that it'd be pretty easy to see much of the track there too, even with the garages and pit boxes in the way. Now, another thing that I love about Martinsville is it's adapted with the times. It hasn't been lost or left behind in time. Martinsville Speedway was one of the original tracks on NASCAR's original schedule. And to this day, it's currently the only one in operation. Martinsville didn't start out as a paved asphalt and concrete facility with catch fences and safer barriers and a nice functioning pit road. Didn't start out like that. Much like the initial decade of Cup tracks, it was a dirt track. But in the 50s, it got paved, and since then has adapted to what the times ask for. In NASCAR's push for more driver safety, safer barriers were added in on top of, like I said, those taller catch fences, and most recently, lights have been added in. Now, another thing that really sets Martinsville apart, at the track especially, is the hot dogs. I'm sorry, I had to talk about them. I know everybody always talks about them, and for those who haven't tried them, it can get annoying hearing about it. But hear it from me, those hot dogs are freaking amazing. I had a good number of them, and knowing the consistency of hot dogs, it's probably still in my gut to this day, but I had a ton of them. And I am not somebody who personally loves hot dogs. Actually, I would rather have a brat growing up in the Midwest. But man, those red hot dogs taste so good, it's beautiful. Now, the final thing, obviously with Martinsville being on the Cup schedule since the start, is the history. You can't last this long if you don't have so much good stuff to add to the schedule and add to the series. And Martinsville has done it. Now, sure, you have these giant great moments. For instance, Gordon versus Johnson in 2007. That's one a lot of people turn to. But the thing is, not every track is going to have a giant, amazing finish. And and those giant finishes don't make up the rest of the 99% of racing at the tracks. The thing about Martinsville is, I have yet to find somebody who can point to a race and say that one flat out sucked and was the worst race of the year. There's been some Martinsville races that aren't good. It's normal. But the frequency of them is so inconsistent that it is really hard to look back and find a large amount. I don't think I can count on one hand how many races I thought objectively were not good from Martinsville since I started watching in 2005. I can't. Say what you want about the COT and the Gen 6. Their durability really has lended itself to Martinsville. That's something that I say that a lot of people really disagree with, and it's really funny seeing how people think that I only like Gen 4 on back racing in NASCAR. But the COT racing on short tracks, and Martinsville in particular, in my opinion, was better than the Gen 4, and the Gen 6 only continued that. The cars are more durable, so you can hit them more. You've had so many amazing moments over the years because the cars are able to stay together better. It's awesome. And I really hope with the next gen car, this continues. And now with testing being done with rain tires for Martinsville, who knows? Maybe later this fall, Martinsville could be the first oval track that NASCAR ever races on in competition during rain with a wet surface. It would be fitting. Martinsville Speedway, in my opinion, is NASCAR's Wrigley Field, and it must be cherished and supported by every fan, in my opinion. These are my reasons for why I love Martinsville and why I think it is the best track on the schedule. But I, like everyone, have opinions, and that was one of them. Now I want to hear your opinions. What are your favorite tracks on the NASCAR schedule? Can be from the trucks, Xfinity, Cup, hell, add in ARCA. If one of the tracks running ARCA is one of your favorite, let me know. I want to hear what your favorites are and why I might be wrong. Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content throughout the week. And until next time, have a good one.